Right there it is. Gonna go inside tonight and take a look around.
Alright, everybody hear me okay? Alright, thanks for having me. Thanks to the museum, who, by the way, booked this about 14, 15 months in advance, which is pretty nice. We all like our calendars filled, and that was pretty awesome, but you kind of wonder when something's booked that far in advance. Did they really mean that? So, here we are today. So, my name is Ben, and I have Ben's Brewing Company and Ben's Brew Station. Is anybody here seeing me for the first time? A couple of you? Okay, well, nice to meet you. Anybody at the meat building here for the first time? A couple of you. All right, very cool. Well, I hope today that I'm going to teach you a little bit about brewing in Yankton and a little bit about what we do here at our operation in Yankton, which I just came from. So, Yankton has a strong brewing culture. It's just been interrupted by time. We were one of the first. And so we're going to get right into that and talk about back in 1866, the Ross Mesher Brewery in Yankton, South Dakota was the first brewery in Dakota Territory. And many of you know about Schwenk Brewing. This is one of the buildings, but what many people forget is that there were actually a couple buildings, and there was a mansion, and there was the bigger building was where now, I guess Julie Fisher has her insurance office. It's right next to the Meridian Bridge. For a long time, it was Farm Credit Services. But that building was torn down, and so we know about Schwenk and many of these people who were brewers there. But these are other Yankton breweries that happened before Prohibition. And, you know, this Forster Brewery, we named a beer called Eliza's Old Ale, and that was where Eliza Forster, when her husband died, Eliza kept the brewery going, which is pretty neat. Early story for brewing in Yankton. So, brewing disappeared in this area because of what they call Prohibition. Schwenk Barth, of course, tried to navigate their way through Prohibition. They had a lot of hops that were contracted, they had equipment, they had barrels. And so they had to try to stay alive. And so they started selling these hop teas and hop elixirs. And I should have brought a prop with me today because Dr. Tom Stanich recently gave me some old hop tea boxes that they had. They were unused boxes. And, you know, they were trying to convince people that, you know, these hop teas would be a really good thing for your health. But really, I think a lot of it was getting hops out there and people who could illicitly brew stuff, right? Let's be real. And so they tried to navigate through Prohibition, but ultimately we know that they didn't exist. So we fast forward to 2005. I'm from Webster up in northeast South Dakota, and I moved to Yankton because I started working for Nebraska Life magazine in Hartington and South Dakota magazine here in Yankton. And I had been in the publishing industry for a short stint, and I had edited a paper in Sioux Falls. I started one in Fort Collins, and I came here to work for those magazines. About 3 years into my time there, we had done quite a few interesting things, but I was bored, and I wanted to get back into owning a business by myself. And I can get into some of my high school businesses and other things that I had prior to that, but we don't have time for all of that today. But what I did do was I started South Dakota's first smoke-free bar, and it was called the Two Glass Bar. That was 2005, and basically everybody said, well, that guy's an idiot. And there's a pretty good reason to think that, because, you know, Yankton was a town that had a lot of bars, and Yankton had a lot of people who knew how bars worked, and that worked with whiskey and beer and darts and pool and video lottery. And I came in and said, what if we didn't do any of those kind of things? And so they said, he's an idiot. And so a couple of things. Why? So we started the first smoke-free bar in the state of South Dakota, not because we said smokers are bad, but because we felt like everybody's doing one thing, let's do something else, right? Let's create a different type of clientele. And so there were a lot of people who weren't going to bars after work, who were not running into their friends after work because they would have to, you know, dry clean their clothes before work. the next day or something like that. Or their wife would make them strip down their clothes in the garage before they came in the house. And so we were banking on, there was a whole group of people out there who just weren't being served. But one of the things also I said that other bars are doing and doing well in Yankton is whiskey, and I didn't have a liquor license. So starting in 2005, we started out with no liquor and no smoke. And when you have no liquor, you gotta make the most of what you got. And so I really went hard after beer and wine. And one of the things that we did was we started out with 6 beers on tap. And I remember my mother was over there, and her dad, French Lego Milch, came in as one of the first customers, and he's like, "Give me a glass of beer." And I said, "Oh yeah, what kind would you like?" He goes, "Beer." And I think that that's kind of how beer was treated in those times, was it was a commodity, and you either drank Miller Lite, Coors Light, Bud Light, or Budweiser, right? And they were all kind of a version of each other. And so when I came in, I put 6 beers on tap, all foreign or craft, and interesting, and then it went to 12. And then we went to 15, and then we went to 20. And then there was a period of time when I had my downtown bar, my brewery, my copper room, where we had 54 beers on tap, right? But along the way, we also educated people. I think one of the things that's tough about craft beer is the reason people come in and say, "Give me a Bud Light," isn't necessarily because they think Bud Light's the greatest beer and they want to drink it for the rest of their life. It's partly that they don't want to feel stupid. They want to go and feel like, I'm making a good decision, I'm leaving money here, I want to leave feeling like that was worth my time, but they don't want to be judged by others. And so when they go into craft beer and there's all these confusing, crazy names and weird words, and IBUs, what's an IBU, how much hops are in this, it's confusing, and people they don't have time for it, and they don't want to be judged by others. So we just took away that. We did a lot of tastings. We started looking at bus trips, and we would take our customers on the road and take them to breweries. And so we kind of created this craft culture. I don't want to pick on anyone in particular, and he's not here today, but one of my very best customers today, 20 years into this, is the biggest craft beer snob I know. And when I met him, everything was a Bud Select, Bud Select, Bud Select. And I can name a lot of people who've come along that journey, and now I'm kind of like, geez, came down to that craft beer snobbery thing. But early on, they were just trying to soak it in. They didn't understand how it all worked. So people doubted this project, but it worked. And one of the things, we eventually did get liquor, we eventually did expand. That building is the old Diamond Shoe Store downtown, and where that started was Lewis and Clark Framing Gallery. There were, some of you might remember the humble beginnings, but there was barely anything on the wall. I got a loan from Port Trust Bank for the purchase of the building, which was $95,000 plus $23,000 on top of it to make the whole business. So that $23,000 was for chairs, lights, any furnishings, glassware, signage. Imagine opening up a business with $23,000 to do it. That's what I did, and I happened to be. The Freeman Company was quite the project. This gives you an idea of what the bar area is like today. This is what the bar area was like when I started to set up in there every night to just get inspired by it.
All right. So this is the game room back here, and Ben's got, he's got something for kids, he's got something for adults, good old Pac-Man, and 4-person player there. And I know when I bring the grandkids down here, they get these ducks. There's ducks down there. I got all sorts of ducks at home now. And then we got driving games and air hockey and basketball shoot, carousels, more things to get candy out of, and stuffies and keychains and things like that. And he's got TVs. They do like some hot pretzels and seasoned pretzels and things like that to have with your beer. But very much an atmosphere where you can bring your kids while you have a beer. Then we're gonna go back here, and this is kind of cool. So these are all game boards that they made a wall out of, which is really awesome. And then back here is Planet Pinball. So we're gonna walk in here, and if you're like me, I love pinball. Grew up with pinball, and so I got the Iron Maiden, Led Zeppelin, Rush, Foo Fighters. This is one of my favorite ones, Foo Fighters. Jaws, Godzilla, King Kong. And then up there it's got high scores, and they have a weekly challenge and numerous tournaments. Oktoberfest, Pulp Fiction, Sopranos. So yes, Ben has done a really cool job. This building has got quite the story, and I'm going to do a video on that when I get back from Texas. But I'll take you out into the brewery area where all his tappers are, and they're doing beers. And but it's a good place to come watch football games also. And there's the bar area, and there's some of their little snacks he has. And then you can get crawlers and things like that to go. 18-pack variety pack. More candy, more stuffies. And then we'll go down here. And they've got t-shirts and hats, flannel shirts, tins, seasonings, you name it, they got it. And then he'll have live music down here, and cornhole, and then the outside there's a patio that he'll have food trucks come down here, and he does a very good job of selecting them. And then out here is the patio. It's nighttime, but it's lit up, getting ready for the holidays and fall. So if you ever get a chance, stop down to Ben's Brew Station in Yankton, South Dakota.
So what I mean by that is, I literally moved my desk in there. I put in one set of table and chairs. And I'm like, oh, isn't this cozy? And as I was starting to organize the space for brewing, I just would sit there and stare and try to figure out where people would go, how it would work. And with enough time, everything started to make sense, only to me. Initially, I thought that brewery, or that space where the people would go would be in the middle bay. There's 3 bays in that space. And then one day I moved my desk into the other room, you know, about 50 degrees in there, and big buzzing lights that cost, you know, my electric bills were like $2,000 just running lights in there because of those halogen lamps. So I stopped doing that and started using flashlights and lamps. But anyway, as I moved in there, I was like, well, there's 2 bathrooms in here. That's going to save a fortune. Then we've got an exit right here. We don't have other exits, but what if we put them in? And anyway, it took a long time of just sitting in the space for me to see it, but there was a mountain of stuff that I had to remove from the ceiling. Electrical transformers, big, oily, greasy mess everywhere. Anybody here ever work at the Freeman Company? A few of you, yeah, you know. And Adeline, Adeline, how many years did you work at Freeman?
52.
52 years. Adeline recently held a Freeman Company reunion with us at the old space and brought back a lot of people, and we told a lot of fun, they told a lot of fun stories. But when I decided to buy this building, it wasn't an obvious choice because first of all, it was occupied, and second of all, I had bought an acre of land up by the bowling alley, which I guess is that way. And my plan was I'm just going to put up a 5,000 square foot steel building and I'm going to produce beer. It's not for people to hang out, it's just to make beer. And I bought that and it was just not very interesting to me, but I was thinking about spending the money, about $300,000 to put up this steel building. Already bought the land, and then I just kept driving around town, and kind of how I sat with this and had to sit with the idea, like I just kept driving around and sitting outside of buildings and staring at them and thinking and dreaming. And that building, my wife worked at for 13 years. She worked at in production control, and she was a buyer. And when I was kind of explaining some of my concerns, Brooke said, I don't know if any of you guys know Brooke, but she says it like it is. And she said, well, whatever you do, don't buy that shithole of a building I work in.
So that's funny.
That's we are still married. And she does work in the shithole again, too. But Brooke would come home from work every day with her hair smelling like oil and everything about that place. And so it's like, oh, great place to bring kids and families. But we've eventually got there. So if you haven't been to the space, this room that we're looking at here holds about fire coded for 248 people. Back beyond here where you see these little white squares, I took those squares out and there were windows there. Now you can get into another room which holds 118 people. And that room now has, well, it has all of the spaces. There's 16 big TVs. There's games throughout the space. We put in a new pinball room in the old cafeteria recently. We've got 10 pinball machines in there. We've got pinball happy hour and groups and clubs. But some of that wasn't very obvious at first, we'll say that. And then the brewing space itself, had railroad ties in the building where trains would actually come right into the building because that's the kind of material that Freeman was dealing with, right? Big steel that needed a lot of material and metal shavings to go out. So that space where the railroad ties are is where we brewed. And so I said when we started in our downtown place, we had 4 5-barrel fermenters, and we had 3 brewing vessels. Well, we're now up to 20 tanks, and we just signed a deal potentially yesterday for 2 more. And we're going to also bring in a little bit of what we call a cold liquor tank, and that's just basically a big water tower within the building, just to make our processes more efficient and speed. So we continue to invest in that building, and that building has given us a lot. Besides a whole bunch of projects, it has also given us, it's concrete floors and it's high ceilings and it's got a loading dock and it's got a huge overhead door. And now we've got 3 semis a week that pull in and pick up beer and take out. This week we sent out 11 pallets of beer to the state of South Dakota. And some of these beers, so Westside Park IPA is still our best-selling beer. When we started the brewery operation up again about 8 years ago, I wrote that recipe, and I actually had a head brewer working for us at the time. He now lives on a boat in Guatemala full-time. Comes back once a year for VA appointments, but Perry, he said, these early beers, I want you to design the recipes for them. And so Westside Park was the first recipe I wrote, and still continues to be. It's about 22% of our overall sales. And we do, we've done 980 batches of beer, and we've probably produced 220 unique beers, but that one still is almost a quarter of all of our sales. Ken and Pepper is holding on to our number 2 spot. That is a light beer that has the flavor and aroma of jalapenos without the heat. You might wonder why do you name a beer Kenny Pepper? Well, Kenny was the Hutterite who sold me the peppers.
I like it.
To come up with names that aren't taken by other breweries. And I've done that before where I've used somebody else's name and I get a nice legal notice in the mail that says cease and desist. So I named the beer Cease and Desist too. Strawberry Blonde is our number 3 bestseller, and this would be a good opportunity to take a quick break and reach under your seat. If anybody can find an orange pen underneath your seat, I have some Strawberry Blonde for you today. There are 4 pens out there, specifically, and that sales data comes only from April of this year until now. So the right store can move a lot of volume. Probably not a huge surprise to everybody, but you know, we're in like every Hy-Vee, we're in all the big liquor stores, and when we started with Walmart in April, like they would just like, boop. And in fact, so much so that we're like, we can't expand anymore because we're gonna run out of beer. But how we got into Walmart was a little bit of a tale. So we're already a top account for the Hy-Vees in the area, and so our distributor says, well, Hy-Vees unfortunately been going through a couple bad years. They've had, some management changes, and Des Moines being a little bit tough on them about how many hours they can schedule employees, and we're seeing it reflected in their sales data. It's like, they said, it's too bad you can never get into Walmart. Don't say that. So they said that, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna figure this out. And so, I go out here and I start talking to the locals, and I'm like, what's it gonna take? And they're like, we would love to have beers, but we don't know what to do because all of those decisions are going to be made in Arkansas. We have no control over that. I'm like, cool, what's the number? Who do I call? I'm like, we don't know. So I started doing that. I started calling all of Walmart's trying to find the chain to find the buyer, and there was no number, no nothing. So it even went so far as calling Walmart's in Bentonville, Arkansas, being like, do you know anybody who works at the corporate office across town? And I'm like, how would I get in touch with them? And they're like, but it just wasn't happening. So LinkedIn, it's a network that I think is useless for a lot of things, but for me, I had this idea that anybody who works at a corporate Walmart is going to have a LinkedIn account because they're always looking for the next best job, right? So I go on LinkedIn, I start searching for who's in charge of buying alcohol, and I find a name, and I buy a pro account where I can send a message to these people, and one of them finally responds, and they're like, oh, this is the person you need to talk to. And I talk to her, and she calls me back, and I said, here's all of our sales data from the Hy-Vees and the grocery stores and the gas stations, and we need to be in your stores. And she's like, you know what, I totally agree, let's do it. She said, here's the deal, we need you to get us information in July for next spring. I'm like, okay, great, so we have about a 11-month lead time on this. And so I'm just sitting here patient, right? Well, then July comes around and I'm following up like, hey, let's do that thing we talked about. And her email bounces and she doesn't work there anymore. And so Natalie, who's the local Walmart manager, is a little bit like me where she doesn't like it when you say you can't do something. And so I told her my predicament, and her and I came up with this plan where she was going to a Walmart trade show in Orlando, and I said, well, I'm going to get you the same package of stuff I gave to my distributor in Black Hills. I'm going to give you everything that's going to want sales data, what our label look like, what customers say, what our distributors say, and she's like, and I'm going to put it in a folder, and I want one of those stickers that has your head on it, and we're going to hand it to somebody's hand, and we're going to make them sign it every day and send us a picture as it moves from desk to desk, and it's going to write on there, do not move to somebody else's desk without sending a picture and sending it to this email address. It worked. We started getting these emails like, oh, I got your folder, and my head was on the sticker. And anyway, it happened, and we now have the ability to be in any Walmart anywhere as long as the manager requested. So we got like special permission. And we're gonna use some of that special permission over the winter months to expand into the warm months. But right now, we're just trying to keep up with what we got. So, any questions I can answer for anyone? Yeah. Start here.
Do you buy your hops locally?
Oh, good question. So, 6 Meridian Hop Farm announced about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago that they are going to cease operations at that location in Yankton. They are considering options of somebody buying out their farm or possibly even relocating and growing some of the hops somewhere else. But I buy like half of their crop every year, and it's their Dakota Challenger hop is in every beer we make, basically every beer we make. Now, some of those really fruity hop varieties are trademarked, and they are only available in our northwest part of the country, and so we buy a lot from that part of the world too. But yeah, we do buy a lot of Yankton hops, and a lot of Yankton water, by the way, too.
Hey, speaking of water, Ken, when you have to make your beer, the water has to be really pure.
Yeah.
And you can't have any chlorine or anything in it, so what type of purification system do you have?
Yeah, so I have a reverse osmosis system, and I have brewing software or a water profile software, and every single recipe I input, every grain I put into it, and it spits out what kind of chemicals I need to add myself. And when I see chemicals, we're talking about like salts, right? Calcium chloride. We need to get a certain amount of calcium in the water because yeast need it to do their job. And we also don't want to get our sulfite chloride ratio off because you're going to detect that as a customer as either being like astringent, bitter, or like soft and pillowy. And sometimes that's not appropriate for the style. So in order to do that, you need to get rid of everything. And the truth is, that is not how our brewery worked until I became the head brewer 2 years ago. Prior to that, I was, mostly on just operations, head brewers. But one of the things when I took over head brewing, water became like a real focus of mine, and we saw our quality and our sales follow. So yeah,
So you talked about other businesses, brewers that have gone away. What do you think has been the difference between your ability to continually grow and theirs maybe to not? To go away? Obviously, because you're in the same market.
Right. Well, a couple of things. So if everybody understood this question, like why are we still here and others aren't, or why are we growing and others aren't? Part of it is that naivete and the youngness and that 23-year-old who didn't have any money and that $23,000, it has meant that along the way we've had to buy things one piece at a time. And so a lot of my competitors have come in with their dream brewery day one. And there are breweries that are funded by people who have private jets. There are people who are funded by doctors. It's just me. I have nothing except a lot of debt. And I need, you guys to drink. So, but anyway, that means that we never really get too far over our skis. We buy a tank at a time. We don't have a centrifuge. It took me many years to get a canning line, and that took a lot of convincing from my bank to do it because they wanted a canned beer. So I think part of it is just not being over leveraged. But the other thing that I'll tell anyone, and I believe it, is being in Yankton is a huge advantage versus being in some of these cities. Why? Well, I own a 28,500 square foot property in 2.5 acres near downtown. I own that. I'm not up to the whims of a landlord that's gonna jack around my lease or worry about who my neighbors are. Like, to me, knowing that my future is determined by my screw-ups and not somebody else's is like really valuable to me. Yeah.
Hey, Ben, so...
Say what?
Oh, go ahead.
All your own grain?
No, no breweries that I'm aware of really malt their own grains. So we buy from a malting house. Or we buy from the biggest probably, which is Raw Malting Group in South Dakota. So.
Yay.
So this building that I wasn't really sure, it was mostly a focus on brewing, and then it became a bar. It's taken off, and we've really leaned into the community. And one of the things is when you got 400 capacity inside and a patio that holds 150, you got to have a lot of events. And so we are booked like with our musicians through Halloween of next year. We have most of our food trucks booked into about August of next year. We have beer festivals lined up. We have Spanish-speaking clubs. We have 3 church groups that meet there. We have just a wide variety of things that happen and need to happen to keep us as a hub of where they think of. But one of the things is, unlike a lot of bars, it's not really a bar. It's very family friendly. There are like something like 35 arcade games in there. We close early. We don't have whiskey. It's well lit. And so you see a lot of people who are in their 30s and 40s who don't get babysitters like they did in years past. Their kids go play some games and mom and dad have 1 or 2 beers and they go home. And it's been a really good situation for us. So I talked about resilience, and here's a couple examples of that, like 40 degrees in the cornfield trying to sell my beer at some events. And this is what my first bar looked like. That was my dad. This was the glass bar. This was just a chunk of cottonwood that wasn't, even cured properly. But we opened and we're still here. This is what getting rid of the epoxy green floor started with. It started with a 3,000 PSI pressure washer, then a 4,000, then a 6,000 PSI diesel, and then I was like, let's get a flamethrower because it's not working. So, during COVID times, we were pretty resourceful. Bars were in trouble, but we found a lot of weird ways to stay scrappy. And one of them was, I remember one day I drove to Omaha to buy like 80 cans, empty cans for somebody so that I could have 2 more days of business to sell out my door. And we created a door at the back of our building with a doorbell, and you place it on my order, you hit the doorbell, somebody slides the door open. We had hand sanitizer. We worked with the distillery over in Vermilion, the Valiant Vineyards, and we sold a bunch of hand sanitizer when people couldn't get it. So, it's been a weird journey, but we're going to probably have a lot more of those challenges to figure out over the next 20 years. So, we're prepared for it. We're prepared for the fight. So see the possibility, learn from others, serve others. This is what my 15-pack sampler looks like now, where you can get Westside Canyon Strawberry all in one pack. I have one more note about maybe some tenacity, and then we'll do some Q&A. But so Walmart has become our #1 customer in the state of South Dakota. It's the Yankton Walmart above in Shakopee, Minnesota, and they own brewery supply group. So we get a lot of our hops, yeast, brewery supplies, and most importantly, our grain from them. Yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback on the gentleman's question about how you have continued to grow. I'm a craft beer nut and took a bunch of Ben's beer with me to Texas last year. But your approachability, do you think your approachability has something to do with your marketing background, and you're a very approachable person? Do you think that?
No, I think that there's some truth in that, and I would say the approachability is on the type of beers we make. So a lot of breweries start with dudes who hang out in their garages and brew beer, and then they're like, people keep saying our stuff's good, we should go pro. Mine was different. I ran a bar, I knew what you drank, I knew what you liked, I knew what you always ordered over and over again, and then I could make a version of it or improve on it. And so I was coming at it from a standpoint of I like to drink beer too, yes, but I'm not creating all of this stainless steel warehouse for me. I'm creating it for the customers. So, you see a lot of our competitors brew these things that are, 7, 8, 9% alcohol, and they're, between $8 and $12, and they come in a tiny glass. 2 to 6% alcohol, because I need your butt in that chair for 3 of them, not one of them. I don't want you once a month either. I need you like 3 times this week. So, yeah.
I love it.
Fair point, yeah. Scott?
Any chance or any thoughts of bringing back the pineapple heat for the...
Oh, late breaking news. That's you guys, by the way. These pineapple heat customers, I always tell people, we have one beer that's an extra spicy version of Kenny Pepper. It comes with pineapple and it's hotter. Gives my mother-in-law heartburn. But when that beer goes away, I hear complaints every single day.
All right, here we are. I know you probably can't see me yet, but okay, here we are at Ben's Brew Station, Yankton, South Dakota. Right there it is. Gonna go inside tonight and take a look around. How are you? Good, good, good.